Happy New Year to America from the Obama administration. A new year to this government means more regulations. That's no surprise. As of yesterday, the Environmental Protection Agency officially began regulating emissions of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases, of course, without congressional approval. Joining me now to talk about this new power grab is Chris Horner, a senior fellow at the Competitive Enterprise Institute. He's the author of Power Grab: How Obama's Green Policies Will Steal Your Freedom and Bankrupt America. Also joining us is syndicated radio talk show host and my buddy, Nancy Skinner. Nancy, to you first. How can unelected bureaucrats regulate something that the legislature decided not to regulate?
Ironically, this particular law was passed by George H.W. Bush in the Clean Air Act, and it gave them authority to regulate dangerous pollutants to public health. And the Supreme Court ruled in '97, or a couple years ago, that carbon was one of these pollutants. Now,
wait a minute. The Supreme Court didn't rule that carbon was a pollutant. The Supreme Court ruled that the EPA can declare almost anything it wants under this legislation to be a pollutant, right?
All right, but the scientific evidence was clear. Much of it didacted during the Bush administration. But look at these huge, extreme winters we've had. 34 inches. The jet stream has changed. The science is clear. It's nonsense to say it doesn't exist. So, but I want to get to a bigger point here on this, because that's a tired old debate.
Go ahead.
Listen, we tried this with sulfur dioxide and acid rain under George W. Bush. We said we're going to do a cap-and-trade program back in 1993.
Right.
And everybody screamed that, oh, it's going to cost $1,000 a ton to regulate. It's never going to work. All our prices are going to go up. You know, they had so much time to do it that it was $60 a ton. It worked perfectly, and acid rain is soft.
All right, I get the argument. So I want to bring Chris in. I want to let Chris make the argument. All right, Chris, do you buy two things? Yeah. One, Chris, do you buy A, that there is a scientific basis behind these decisions of the EPA, and B, just wearing your hat as an American citizen, do you buy the notion that Congress can specifically decide not to regulate something, and then unelected bureaucrats in the executive branch can go ahead and regulate it?
Well, we've put all of that on trial. CEI and some attorneys general are suing on this. And as you know, talking points have and Al Gore learned the hard way, talking points in this context have a very unhappy history when you go to trial, which is where we're going with this. All the talking points in the world won't change the fact that when cooling suddenly means warming, what does warm winters mean? The science is somewhat in flux. Man's principal contribution to changing the temperature has been demonstrated to be found in man manipulating the temperature data. So Congress refuses to act on this. This was too radical for the Democratic Congress. The argument about SO2 cap and trade being just like this just shows you have no idea what these cap and trade schemes are. SO2 is expressly designed to keep the price of coal-fired electricity viable and affordable, to keep the industry viable. You may have remembered that our president was caught on video saying that carbon dioxide cap and trade, designed very differently, was designed to bankrupt coal and to cause everybody watching's electricity prices to necessarily skyrocket. So this is why Congress did not act. It was up to Judge.
All right. We only have about a minute left, Nancy. I'm going to go to you, Nancy. And of course, you're both going to be back after the break. Nancy, I want you to answer me this. Nancy, I want you to answer me this. Hold on, Nancy. Should elected representatives be making these decisions, or should scientists and bureaucrats be making these decisions? By these decisions, I mean, what should be banned?
Scientists. Bush used lobbyists. Obama uses scientists. Look, the reason that we're seeing these extremes in Australia and these extremes everywhere is because when the globe, the last decade was the hottest on history. This last year was. There's more evaporation, so there's more precipitation. So to say, oh, it's cold and that disproves it is idiotic.
Well, you should look outside this building to the piles of snow that are 8 feet high, 10 feet from where I'm now seated.
Judge, the answer to your question is unelected bureaucrats should not wait until they decide they can't wait for elected lawmakers anymore. Unelected bureaucrats have to wait. The Supreme Court said EPA could declare oxygen a pollutant if they wanted to. This will fail in court. As the attorneys general, we are arguing, and the science will fail because it is fairly settled. Man's biggest contribution to temperatures is manipulating the temperature
Hang on, Nancy. Stay with us during the break. More with Chris Horner and Nancy Skinner after this.
I'm often asked the question, is
greenhouse gases still with us? Our Power Grab author, Chris Horner, and syndicated radio talk show host, Nancy Skinner. Nancy, to you first. I know you were champing at the bit to jump in. I don't want to talk about the science because you guys simply won't agree on the science. But I do want to talk about politics. The EPA came about under a Republican president, Richard Nixon. Vastly expanded under a Republican president, George H.W. Bush. The Supreme Court said, yes, the EPA does have the authority to declare greenhouse gases to be pollutants. In a famous dissent, Justice Scalia, I won't quote the dissent literally because the language is extremely colorful, basically said body odor or Frisbees could be declared under this law to be pollutants. Question, Nancy, what has become of our democracy when scientists and bureaucrats, instead of elected officials, are making decisions that profoundly affect our everyday lives?
Well, it sounds like they all did. You had Congress passed it, and Supreme Court, Republican Supreme Court supported it. So, you know, here's the thing. I think that from a financial standpoint, we should be looking at this as an economic opportunity. Everyone talks about cap and trade. They focus on the cap, not the trade. The innovations that we can, if we start to get serious, the former chairman of Shell Oil said gas is going to be $5 a gallon by 2012.
I want you to talk to me about democracy and bureaucrats making laws.
And entrepreneurs that could make money by reducing our energy costs, reducing our dependence.
All right, you don't want to answer the question.
And selling them.
Nancy, I love you. Chris Horner, over the same weekend that the EPA, miraculously declared greenhouse gases to be pollutants, the Department of Health and Human Services said death panels are back in Obamacare, even though the legislation was amended to keep them out. So I will ask you this same question, Chris Horner. What has become of our democracy when laws are written by scientists and bureaucrats rather than elected representatives?
Well, we've got a bureaucracy run amok. We've got bureaucrats running with a law that each time it was attempted to be amended, and was amended, they tried to regulate CO2, and it was rejected each time. So the court said, well, you can regulate anything if you ground it in the statute. EPA said, good, we want to regulate energy use, and it's not to make the price go down. That's been described as, by the people pushing this, as the worst thing that could happen to humanity. They want to ration energy sources that work. It's so economically beneficial that it requires a bureaucratic intervention that lawmakers won't impose. There's money to be made on Hurricane Katrina, the housing bubble, and every other bad idea. But when you rob Peter to pay Paul, Paul will clean up. That's why these companies are pushing this. That's why people like Nancy always say, you can make money, but this is bureaucrats running amok when Congress doesn't have the will to do something this wretchedly harmful.
The question, Nancy, is why aren't decisions made by the Congress, and how can bureaucrats overrule the Congress? We've got about 30 seconds. Nancy.
They were. They were. In the Clean Air Act, they were. And it's a finite resource.
What provision?
The former chairman of Shell Oil Company said $5 a gallon.
You're changing the subject.
What's that going to do to our economy if we don't get smart?
What is this going to do to our economy?
All right,
this is designed to make energy prices skyrocket.
What is it going to do to our democracy, Nancy, when bureaucrats, rather than members of Congress, write the laws?
I'd rather have scientists advising members of Congress than lobbyists who wrote the laws during
It's a good debate, guys. We appreciate it. Chris Horner, Nancy Skinner, thank you for joining us. We'll be right back.